Hey guys, welcome to Cheer Chat Podcast. I'm Peyton and I'm here with
Gianna.
Angeline.
And today, our guest this week has been a cheerleader for 15 years. She was part of one of the all-time greatest legacies in cheerleading with Cheer Extreme Senior Elite. She competed at events such as NCAA, UCA, Champions League, Worlds, Cheersport and Majors. She was a co-captain of her high school varsity cheer team, and now she pursues her doctorate in counselor supervision and education with a passion for athletes and mental health. We're so happy to announce that this week's guest is Nia Faye Cureton.
Oh, hi guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you.
So first, let's get a little bit of background as to who you are. Maybe talk about what you pursue in college and how that kind of interlaces with cheerleading.
Yeah, so it's crazy because I didn't even use my undergrad degree.
it was most of us won't.
Yeah, it was event planning. And then through my sorority, we did a few events with mental health, and I was just like, okay, this is what I'm passionate about, right? So I applied for my master's in mental health counseling at A&T. And then shortly after that, I was like, okay, let me go ahead and just do the full thing with my doctorate, because after doing mental block, I was like, I'm just so passionate about athletes' mental health. I need to continue to find the gaps. Let me do some research. Let me study, right? And so I think that is where I'm currently at. I think too, my background in cheer and then also my personal struggles coming out of it. And just realizing a lot of things that I was also struggling with as well. So led me into doing mental block and then also wanting to pursue my doctorate. So that's where we are now.
Yeah, so Mental Block, if you guys don't know, is a documentary that you made with 12 athletes. I think it was 6 retired, 6 current athletes, talking about mental health and all the problems that come with cheerleading that a lot of people go unnoticed. It does have 20,000 views on YouTube. I don't know if you've checked recently.
No, I haven't checked in a while.
Yeah, so that was so crazy to me. And one of the reasons I was excited to have you on was because I had watched it pretty much when it came out, because that's when I first started at Cheer Extreme, and I saw a lot of people reposting it, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of into this. So I watched it. So I am excited to have you here, and I was so excited you reached out.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about this with you for so long.
Oh, yay.
So
thanks for having me.
to ease our way into it, if you're comfortable with sharing, was there a specific experience you had as a cheerleader, or maybe a trigger that kind of made you realize maybe it could have been post cheer world or while you were at practices or something like that, where you were like, oh, this is something that people aren't focusing on that we need to get in check. Where was that moment for you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot of, I think, positives too, right, to cheering, especially on that level. You learn leadership, you learn teammate or being a good teammate. You learn how to put other people's emotions first before yours, right? And so I think for me, that was the biggest thing. I think the coaches did a great job instilling those leadership skills in me. And then just making me all well-around athlete. But I don't think I really realized the problems until I came out of cheering. I was like, okay, why don't I know how to eat? Why don't I not know how to work out? Why am I a perfectionist? Why am I type A? Why do when I walk into a room? I think I just got to a point where I was like, okay, I can talk in front of people.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, where is this stemming from, right? And I don't want to put anything on coaches or parents, right? Because I think that they did what they felt was best to create the athlete that they needed me to be in that moment, right? Because we're trying to meet a score. We're trying to beat the teams. So I think for me, it was like, okay, well, let me give grace there. Because maybe they didn't realize the problems that they were instilling in me by being hard on me, right? And so I was like, okay, well, undergrad, I was like, okay, well, I'm not eating the calories I should eat because I feel like if I eat this, then I'm going to gain weight. And I still struggle with that to this day. I work out at Orange Theory, and I'm like, I have to go in here and I'm competing against people on the treadmill beside me. You know what I'm saying? I can't just go regularly work out because I feel like that's just always going to be the athlete in me. So I still kind of struggle with eating to this day. I feel like I can't go and eat certain things without gaining weight. And so it's something that I'm actively trying to do, right? I'm trying to recover. And so there was one athlete on there specifically when she talked about it, because you are wearing a 2-piece. And then you do have different body types, and they're not always celebrated, right? I think we just got into a point in the years post-COVID, we were like, okay, body positivity, this is where we are now. And so I think that was the biggest thing for me. And then the perfectionism thing, it was very hard. I was a leader, yes, but I was leading the way that I felt was best for the team. And so then you step into different roles outside of cheering, and you're like, okay, Like, I have all these personalities, group work, I need to do my part, but I'm also going to do someone else's part to make sure that it's perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
I relate to that.
Yeah. So it's like I realized that, like, being perfect. And I was like, okay, well, like, if I'm always going to be perfect, then, that leaves no room for learning, right? And I think you're always going to be a student in whatever you do. And so I think I've been learning to do that. So trigger-wise, to answer your question, I didn't really realize any of those things until I got done cheering. And I didn't know who to blame. I was like, who do I blame for this? Like, is it me, right? Because mental health didn't really become an issue until COVID hit. People did, because you're in your house, people were like, okay, like, what is this? Because we live in a culture that's very fast-paced, that you don't really have time to sit down and be with your emotions unless you allow it. And so I think that was it for me. It was very hard for me to be like, okay, like, is it my parents' fault? Is it the coach's fault? Like what do I do, right? Because their job is to make you the best. Can we fault them for that?
Yeah.
And I realized that too after doing mental block. I was like, I don't want anybody to watch this and I think that was the hardest thing about releasing it. I don't want anybody to watch this and be like, am I a bad coach? Did I not do the right job? Did she hate cheering here? And I really wrestled with bringing on athletes that were currently in the gym, because they're going for world titles. They're going for championships. I didn't ever want it to be, well, they're here and they're saying these things, because cheer is political. So I was like, how do I protect these athletes while they're telling their stories, but also making sure that I protect the gym, because social media is nasty.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was a big thing for me. I never wanted it to be, oh, she's bashing. No, I love cheering. And I would still ride behind anybody who still cheers, right? But I think there's a way to make sure that we are protecting the athletes mentally, emotionally, and physically now that we know that what issues are being surfaced. And so I think for me, that was the biggest thing, releasing mental block and struggling with that, because did everybody have the tools and resources that they need back then to be the best coach, to be the best athlete, without suppressing the emotions that came with it?
Yeah, I think that's, like, you worded that so perfectly, because especially, and obviously this isn't to discredit people who aren't on high-profile teams, but especially being on a high-profile team, like, and you understand that struggle as well, like, and even when that doc came out, like, there were people who took that and still somehow weaponized it and took it as, oh, so-and-so wants pity and this and that. And it's just like that inability to listen.
Right.
And that pressure, like you said before, like it's so hard to know where the problem's coming from. And so I think you worded that perfectly. And also, like, to continue that, a lot of the girls in the documentary that you had talked really openly and almost like alarmingly nonchalantly about like eating disorders, anxiety, and stuff like that. And so to go along with that, cheerleading is just one of those things, and all of us can relate to this, is one of those things where injuries aren't, if it, like, does not make you not able to walk or have any normal, like, brain function, like, it's not an injury. Right. So, like, concussions, at least in my experience, you were expected to continue practicing through. That's not something that you as opposed to the NFL or, like, other professional sports, like, you work through those injuries. And I mean, I think it was like Peyton Mabry or someone in like early cheer athletics, like she competed with a cast on her arm and she based with one arm. Like there's just an expectation to continue no matter what. And so in your opinion, how do you think that this distorted view that cheerleaders have and just like the idea that the industry puts on you really is affecting post-retirement, so when you leave? So what effects do you think, like, having that and growing up in, because those are formative years too, like those are years where you learn the most about yourself. What do you think those effects were like, and your, like, experience through learning it in higher education? Like, what do you think that's like for after retiring?
Yeah, unhealthy. Yeah, to put it as simple as possible. I think that, to talk about the injury thing, like, my best friend, she had several concussions and still worked through it. And I'd be like, why don't you go sit down? But at the time that I was on the team, I was like, your replacements are sitting up front. I remember tearing my ACL and being out, and the coaches were very supportive. But it was the back of my head that I was like, I can't recover in 6 months. I need to recover in 3.
Yeah.
And I did that. Because I was like, I have to get back on the floor. I don't care if I'm not 100%. I never went back to the doctor and got cleared.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom and Dad. I don't think anybody really knew that.
A lot of injuries too, like at least in my experience, I just never went to, like I joke all the time, I probably tore something somewhere along the line, but like I never went to the doctor because I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And I was more afraid of losing my spot than I was of hurting myself in the future. And it's just like, it's so weird to think about now, like looking on the outside, because, and also just like professional sports, they're grown people. Like they are old, not old, but they're like fully developed in the head pretty much. And so it's like, it's crazy that these kind of things where, and like you said, at least at, like Cheer Extreme and other programs like that, like there is someone waiting to take your spot. And it's a type of competitiveness that you find in no other sport.
Yeah.
Because you're not just competing against other teams, and you're not competing against your social media enemies. You're competing against your own teammates. And I think that's what makes like bonding so much harder too, as like a young person in cliques and stuff, like you talked about in the documentary. Like it makes it so hard because that if I mess up, my friend next to me is going to take my spot, and I'm going to have to accept it like there's no hard feelings and just like move on. And I think that's why a lot of cheerleaders like internalize things now.
Yeah.
And me included. And like I just think that's normal to like internalize, because you're just taught that it's not personal.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing. And no one really says that to you, but it's just like a thing you have to understand, is that it's not personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheers is a business.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like what I realized, especially being 2014 first year, you got the Fab Five, you got Erica Engelbert, you got Molly Gibbons, you got Lexi Pilson. I mean, you're like, okay, this year only like what? I think that year only like 8 people from other teams got on that team because it was very veteran heavy. So there was only 8 rookies that year, maybe 9. And so, I mean, it was competitive. I mean, then I understand they've won 2 back-to-back titles. And so at this point, they're not playing any games. And so, like, you knew that walking in there. Like, you're going to be the best of the best. Like, when she's like, okay, you need to come out of the corner. You need to throw your tryout tumbling pass. That's what you're throwing without a warm-up, Like, the warm-up was aside. Now this is the time. But I think, to speak to the team part that you were talking, yeah, my dad always told me, he was like, don't be the one. And by that, he meant, if you are a deduction on the score sheet, they will make it known who it was. There's film. But don't you be the reason that the team loses. If you guys are going to lose, it's going to be not because of you, right? And so I always got on the mat and did that. And I don't think I made my first mistake ever in my cheer career until we got to Worlds 2016. My stunt came down the first day. And I was distraught. And my flyer thought I was mad at her, but I wasn't. I was upset with myself because it was my responsibility, right? And so we were in second, and we were only in second by like, I don't know, maybe 0.1, 0.2. But it was Worlds, and I was like, I'm in my senior year. Like, why am I messing up all of a sudden, you know? But that is something I think that I carried with me, is don't be the one. And I took that with me past cheering. I took that with me into college. I took that with me into post-grad. And now being in the doctoral program, it's very, very competitive. Your cohort members are your cohort members, right? And you guys support each other, but you're on your own. And you want to be the best. Who's pushing out the most research? What does your resume look like? What does your vita look like? What are you doing when you're not in class? So beyond the homework and the reading and the presentations and the conferences, what are you doing in your field? How can you be the best? And so I think that mentality kind of is still sticking with me. Like, don't be the reason why you fail, okay? And so I think that's also where I currently am with that as well. And so I always hear my dad's voice in the back of my head. Even when I go work out, you need to get 12 splat points or it's not going to count, like just small things like that. And so for me, I think with cheering, like transitioning out of it, there is nobody telling you what to do anymore. And that's scary. And there's almost this level 2 of your mental emotional health that was not protected. To kind of speak to the things that you were saying, especially with things being so political, with injuries, with replacements. You are kind of taught, like, perfectionism. You are taught that, like, you're not good enough. You are taught that, you have to kind of stick to this schedule, and if you don't, then like, what are you worth, right?
Yeah, right.
If you don't look this way and the coaches don't like the way you look, then the judges aren't going to like the way you look. Your toe has to be on this line at this 8 count, or that's a deduction. Just
and that'll be the reason you lose too.
Right.
Yeah.
Just small stuff like that. And so I don't think there's any in the athletic world, and when you watch the documentary, especially, I think what was so, for me watching it back, and I don't think I've ever had a time to like really process or come on and like anywhere and like talk about what I thought post, but watching it back for me, I was like, the fact that people this young endure something so much to the point that they don't even want to be on social media. Mm-hmm. Social media wasn't popping like that in 2014, right? Like it just was not. And I remember when it did, 2015, 2016, and we actually had a meeting as a team. The head coach was just like, you guys don't need to respond, just let it be what it is. But, some of my teammates were like, no, like they're saying this, they're saying that. But I say this to say, like, there are things that people are enduring at this young age or age period that isn't talked about enough. Mm-hmm. And then we don't see the effects until they get out. And I think that's why I brought 6 of my former teammates on, because they were actually able to talk about what they've experienced. College, and now some of them are in corporate, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the girls who are still cheering or were still cheering at that point, and what they experienced. And the similarities and differences were not that far off if you like listen.
Yeah.
I think the people that were still cheering got more of the bullying aspect, which was really hard to hear.
Yeah. So you mentioned how like it post retired, like it made you really competitive and stuff. Do you think in like some sort of like sick and twisted way that growing up in that industry and under that pressure, do you think that contributed to the success you've had in school and like your higher education and your jobs and stuff like that? Like, do you think that helped, or do you think it maybe hurts your career?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it helped. I think there is something about cheering that can help you be a good leader in different aspects. And I think the coaching staff did a really great job about being able to instill that in you, to make sure you're well-rounded. And well-rounded means adaptable in any environment that you are put into. Because if you can compete in front of 25,000 people, hopefully one day, once you realize that if you do have anxiety presenting in front of people, which a lot of people do, if you decide to take public speaking classes, whatever, maybe you will be well behind the scenes. I think there's ways to still be great. But to answer your question, I think that it enhanced my drive to do all these things. Because I've always said, even when I was here at High Point doing undergrad, I was like, I'm going to go get my master's and doctorate. Like, I don't know what it's going to be in, but I'm going to go all the way through. And I think that cheer helped me have that drive because there are things to accomplish. But I think it also, there's duality in a lot of things for me. So I think it also like hindered the way that I approached things. And for me, my faith has been a really big thing for me lately, my walk with God. And I think I had to lean into that. I know I had to lean into that a lot to continue doing what I was doing, because none of it was possible without him. And so I think, that's where I'm at.
So do you think so for you, it's kind of like a for better and worse kind of thing. So you wouldn't take it back if you had the chance. And I think that's such a hard, it's a hard question to ask, and it's also a hard question to answer, because I don't think, when I think back on my career, I kind of think I remember everything, which I never thought I was going to. I thought it was just going to be all the good moments and all of, but I really remember more of this day sucked, and I will never forget this practice for the rest of my life. Yeah. But I also would never have changed it because I knew, and looking at it now, retrospectively, I knew what it was going to be and where I would be. I really don't, it's so hard to think, but I don't think I'd be where I am right now without struggling like that. And it's so hard to conceptualize that, that because in the moment, it sucks. A bad practice, a stunt falling at competition, it sucks. You feel like that is the worst thing that could ever happen to you, and then you get through it. Yeah. And then that's just, it turns out that wasn't the end. Yeah. So in the documentary, Ryan Cummings, who, if you're listening to this podcast, you know who she is, but she was on Senior Elite a while, 6-7 years maybe. I think she has almost close to 600,000 followers on social media. She's probably one of the highest profile cheerleaders in the digital age, I would say, probably. One of the things that really stuck out to me that she said was how people used to tell her, she's like about 5'8", 5'9", and people used to tell her that she's too tall to fly, but she was also too small to base, and like, she said, what am I good for? And that was just like, I literally got chills when she said that, because it was just so like all-encompassing of what that documentary was about. And I just like, that like really stuck with me. And so now that you've become sort of an expert in this field, how much do you think this responsibility to suppress those feelings and make her not feel like that and make other athletes not feel like that was unavoidable because it was the industry's fault? Or how much of it do you think the parents could have done a better job, or how much do you think that it's the coaches? Like, what's the ratio of kind of responsibility and how she was supposed to deal with that as a kid?
Yeah. Shout out Ryan, killing it at Clemson right now.
But also nothing against her parents. I didn't mean to like word it like that. But like you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No. Her mom did great job of raising her and her sister. I was just with her sister last night. But yeah, no. To answer your question, I think there were a few athletes that I had whose stories really stuck out. It was Ryan, it was Jayla, it was Gabby. And then also there was somebody else who carried it very, very well. Kaylee Wilkerson. She talked very well about life afterwards. But if I had to pick top, Ryan for sure, the way that she was comfortable. All the athletes that still came on and that were still cheering on Senior Elite at that time, I was like, I'm letting y'all know what y'all are signing up for, right? Because I know you're still cheering, and that's why I was kind of hesitant at first to release it. But it needed to be released. So I was okay with whatever came with it. But yeah, when she said, what am I good for? I was like, okay, yeah. Like,
yeah. That's it. That is the point. That's the problem.
Like, that is the problem that the industry instills. And yeah, 5'8", 5'9". I don't even know how to. I didn't even know what to say to her, because when I was on Senior Elite in 2014, everybody was 5'8", 5'9" flying. That was like the standard. Like, you want to be tall because it looks good from far back, right? So,
even Lily Barber too, when she was on the first year of Lady Luck's, like, tall flyers are just, in my opinion, they have better body lines than shorter. I mean, nothing against shorter flyers, but
yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah. And so I was very. I think there are things that go on that you will never know, right, behind the scenes. As far as what are the coaches looking for now, what are the judges looking for. But unless that is explained to an athlete, they're never going to understand. They're going to internalize that as it is them, right? And so I don't want to speak for Ryan, because I think that she's going to have many opportunities to tell her story on any type of platform that she decides to go on if she wants to, right? But I guess outside looking in, to protect her and to make sure that I say this correctly, I think that she was a type of athlete that she was like, okay, well, let me just roll with the punches. But even though this is affecting me, right, internally, she was a great flyer and still is.
One of the best, in my opinion.
And, at Clemson now, she's basing and she's killing it. But I think as far as the coaches go, I think that if there was anything that was wrong, or if there was anything that wasn't being seen, I think that would have been the time to let an athlete know. Because they do walk around with that. And you don't know how that affects the way they eat. And not speaking about Ryan anymore, but speaking about like any flyer or any base or anybody having to change positions. That could affect a lot of the ways that they do things. Like, okay, if I was in her shoes and I heard that, I'd be like, okay, what do I need to? Can't do anything about my height. This is how I was born. Now are you telling me I'm too big to fly, like weight-wise? Like, I would have had a lot of questions, and I'm sure she did. But that's very hard to hear. And I think if there was anything that could have been done I think that the industry has to give people of that age more, they have to give them more respect, and I think they have to give them more like room to know what's going on in something that they're competing in. I think that a lot of times they downplay the age of the athletes, and maybe they won't understand, but like, no, these girls understand completely what's going on. Like, let them in on what's going on. And I think from a coach's perspective, I think there's a way to let your athlete know what's going on. And so I think that's from a coach's perspective, let your team in because they're competing for you at the end of the day, right? And so I don't know what could have been done differently for her, but from the coach's standpoint, I would have just been like, hey, like, this is why. Is it going to make it any less or any better? No, right? Because, like, I grew up in this role. Now what do you expect? I can tumble. I can do I'm a well-rounded athlete. There's nothing that you can tell me that does not make me great, right? But that, like she said, like, what am I good for? I think a lot of athletes carry that with them when stuff like that happens. As far as the parents go, what are you supposed to say to your child at that point? Like, your child gets in the car after practice. And I was told today, like, I'm too tall to fly. What are you supposed to say?
Yeah.
You know, because they're paying for you think your child loves this sport, and Ryan will tell you to this day, like, she loved cheer. She loved it for the performance. She didn't care. And Ryan, if you listen to this, I don't want you to think I'm speaking for you, but she didn't really care about, like, she's very humble. She didn't care about, like, the fans and the social media. Like, she could care less.
Yeah.
She just really, really enjoyed performing, right?
And she never asked for the social media
never
presence.
asked for that. And so I think, as a parent, like, what are you supposed to say? Like, I wouldn't know what to say to my child, because I put in all the money, they put in all the reps, they did all the practice, they're great. What are you supposed to say besides probably wanting to say something to the coach, right? And so I don't think there's anything from a parent perspective, but now you have a whole load of, like, mental health and emotional things that you have to deal with behind the scenes. And I don't think parents get credit for that either, right? And so, yeah, I think that's what I would say. I think there's better preparation or better communication that can be done from coaches to athletes on all levels with cheering, because the parents, they only have the tools and resources to be there for you the best they know how, right? And so, yeah.
Do you think, so a lot of gyms have you sign, like, a social media policy, especially, like, bigger gyms. Do you think that, because the easiest thing and the most common thing that coaches say is just, you just gotta, just ignore it and move on. Don't engage, because engaging does make it worse. I do agree that it does make it worse.
Right.
But do you think that wording it in the way of, like, you just gotta ignore it and move on, do you think that that's a productive way of saying it? Or do you think that there's a different way coaches can still get that point across, but say it in a way that doesn't sound like, just deal with it, I don't know what to tell you, you know?
Yeah, I think there's stuff that needs to be put in place. Now that I've done the documentary and now that I've realized how, because, like, yeah, you can't engage, but there is still access to social media, and you can't really take that away from your athletes. I think you would think that at this point in sports that there would be some type of mental health professional in every gym, every college team, every football. Like, you would think that would be in place.
And it is for other sports.
Right.
They have sports psychologists in
and
the
cheer
NFL,
does not.
the NBA. Yeah.
And it just does not. And you would think that if that's not in place, then the coaches are going to get the training that they need to be there for their athletes mentally and emotionally. Because sometimes, because of the schedule and because of how it is, like, you would think that they don't have the time, but there are things that can be put in place. So I think there's a better way to prepare coaches, because I think sometimes if there's a big age gap, it's very easy as a coach to be like, okay, yeah, social media, like, whatever,
Yeah.
But there are kids that look for that validation on social media, especially right after you compete.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think to answer your question, I think there are things that could be done, and there's money for it,
Tons of money for it.
that could be done for them to be like, hey, like, this is why we're telling you guys to stay off social media. But know that if you do get on social media, like, we have these people in place for you to talk to. Like, your mental and emotional health is very,
Resources.
very important, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's to, sum it up, it's just about using your tools and resources and communicating.
Hypothetically, if that were to take place, do you think, because coaches, in order to be a coach, you do have to go through USASF certification, which you go to, like, it's like tri-state kind of.
Okay.
In order to become eligible. And what they talk about there is kind of just like levels. I mean, I've never gone, but my friends that are coaches have gone. It's like level stuff, some ideas. They talk about the misconduct between like coach and athlete, which is a whole different discussion. But if they were to say, like, we encourage you to do this and provide resources and whatever, who do you think should be providing? Like, do you think USASF or varsity or something like that, like someone from the industry should be providing that resource? Or do you think it's like gym specific and they should be encouraged to get their own sort of like therapist, if that makes sense?
I think USASF, let's not think about the big brand, USASF or varsity, I think that's something that they should have for gyms to be put in place. And if the gym doesn't have one, then they need to find one. I mean, they have a lot of money at the end of the day. And I think that if that was something that wasn't or is important to them, then they'll make sure that the gyms have that, because you got to think about gyms in rural areas, right? Yeah. They may not have that easy access. So what can we do to make sure that that gym in that rural area does get that if they're not in a bigger city? So I think it would have to be a corporate thing, like a bigger thing for them to make sure that that's implemented. Because if you leave it up to the gym, then there's a lot of wiggle room, right? People need to be told exactly what to do. Yeah. And so I think that's what would have to be done.
Yeah. So now you're like in a post-cheerleading world. How do you think that these things you've learned through your higher education have transformed the person you are today, and also like how you help your friends who are still in cheerleading? And also like just in general, if you could provide one piece of advice to anyone who's currently still a cheerleader and is struggling with mental health issues, what would it be? Like, what's the number one thing that you've learned and you're like, people need to know this?
Wow, there's so much. Let me pick one.
Or you could just rattle them off if you want.
Okay. I think that I would say, and this may sound very simple, and I know it's like easier said than done, but if someone were to look at me when I was cheering, I'd be like, give yourself some grace. You are in a world where everything is so high pressured, and it is about what you are producing. Give yourself some grace, because you don't have all the tools and resources, and you don't know. Like, there's so much more out there than this, and you're going to be great. Just do this for fun, right? Let everything else be background noise. I would tell someone still cheering that. And I also would tell them that you're good enough. You're beautiful. Like, your body's perfect. Like, you are doing exactly what you're supposed to do right now, and don't let anybody make you feel less than. I wish somebody would have told me that. And I think also, too, I would have told them that rest is a requirement, not a reward. Because I think a lot of times, too, you are in that fast producing environment, and that translates into the outside world, and now you're not resting because you feel like you need to be producing all the time. And so those are like the top 3 or 4 things that I would say to somebody cheering right now.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think cheerleading doesn't matter in the end. I think a lot of people struggle, even myself included, which ended up being why I went to Cheer Extreme after I graduated high school, because I never intended on cheering after high school. Right. Was that when I ended my career, I noticed that I was from a D2 gym. I noticed that I wasn't a world champion. I defined my career when I graduated high school as the things I didn't get to do. I never got to compete at NCA. I never got to compete at UCA or win UCA. I even as far as like I only won Cheersport once. That was like bad to me. I thought that was horrible. And I think that's like what you said was perfectly worded, because it just, the rings and the jackets don't matter. When you leave, you just kind of realize like, and I'm still going through it. Like now I'm only 2 years post. This is my second season post, like, retirement, I guess. And I'm just now getting to the point of where I don't get FOMO. Like, when we're recording this, Cheersport is this weekend. And I went last year with, like, my friends who were still on the team. And, like, I don't feel like I need to be there anymore. Like, so it took a whole year for me specifically to get to a point of where I realized, like, that's not the end for me. Like, there's so many things I can do. And the amount of rings or jackets that I have don't matter. Because every time I look at the rings that I've gotten with Cheer Extreme, I look at them and I just remember the moment. And I remember how I felt in that moment when I won that. And it was just, like, bliss, pretty much. And you don't think about the rings you don't have on your finger. You look at the ones that you have and you, like, remember them for what they are. So I think you worded that perfectly.
Last thing I would say to that, because I didn't win anything.
But you were on Senior Elite, girl.
I know
that's a for life thing.
And I was gonna say, I know anybody probably listening to this post Senior Elite probably chuckle because we laugh about it. But I mean, I think 2015 Worlds kind of stung for many of us, but I think when I realized it, the rings, the jackets, like, that's all gonna fade, right? Like, it's the accolades, the achieve, like, that's great. But are you a good person?
Yes. Yep.
And I think that is what has stuck with me cheering after cheering. Like, are you a good person, like, to your core? Like, who are you?
Did you learn from the losses and not dwell in them?
Yeah, at some point. And I think, too, like, I know I spoke on my faith earlier, but I think that, too, like, that really helped me put things into perspective. Like, are you a good person? Because that's what matters. And, like, in this world now where everybody's just so mean, and everybody's talking about everybody, like, are you a good person to your core? And so, I think to speak to that, who are you as a person outside of that? And if you are struggling with that, remember your foundation, right? And so, Yeah.
Perfectly said.
Thank you.
That was so beautiful.
I think I almost cried like this.
Right.
So where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm private on Instagram, but if you follow me, I'll follow you back if you have a little bit of mutual follows. And if not, just shoot me a DM. But I do have a page. My regular one is just Nia Faye, I'm pretty sure. NIAFAYE. Mental block is just mental_block1. And I think my TikTok is just Nia Faye.
Do you plan on doing anything more with the mental block documentary?
Yes.
Okay.
I definitely do. I'm trying to, in the midst of work and school, I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next with that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much.
Wish you the best too, because that episode was great.
It
was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
This is like
guys.
a dream conversation. I love that we were able to talk about
yes.
this.
Thank you for having me. I definitely needed to talk about, I think, mental block post. So
yeah, I was really excited. I like you said in the beginning, I don't think I ever heard you talk about after the fact and after it came out, because I think the comments on the video are off and everything. So like, for good reason. Let's just put that for good reason.
Yeah.
But I was really excited to hear your input because I didn't hear it anywhere else. So this was really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to follow us at Cheer Chats Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter /X.
We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.